Pastor Amelia Brooks found the man before she found her keys. He was curled against the church's brick entryway, half hidden behind a support column, an old sleeping bag pulled up to his chin, and a worn leather briefcase clutched against his chest like it held something more valuable than clothes or food. Frost had settled on the pavement overnight. Amelia had opened this church door on colder mornings than this one, but something about the careful way this stranger held that briefcase, even in sleep, made her pause. She didn't wake him. She didn't call anyone, didn't take a picture, didn't do any of the things people sometimes did with strangers sleeping in doorways. She simply went inside, made a hot breakfast in the church's small community kitchen, and set it down quietly beside him before returning to her morning routine. When he woke an hour later, startled and immediately ashamed, he stared at the plate like it might be a trick. "I don't have money for this," he said quickly, already gathering his things to leave. "You don't have to tell me your story before you eat," Amelia said simply, not looking up from the papers she was sorting nearby. His name was Jonah Reed, 44 years old, and it took him most of that breakfast to trust the silence enough to fill it. He'd been a construction estimator once, good at his job, married, steady. Then his wife died, and something in him that had always held the pieces together simply stopped working. He lost the job first, then the apartment, and somewhere in the unraveling, he'd asked his younger sister Claire to take in his 14-year-old daughter, Grace, just temporarily, just until he found his footing again. He never quite found it, and the longer he stayed lost, the more ashamed he became of the man Grace would see if she ever visited, sleeping in shelters, surviving on odd days of work. Nothing left of the father who used to build her furniture with his own hands. "Claire kept sending me updates," Jonah admitted, staring at his empty plate. "Photos, school things. She never stopped trying to keep us connected. I'm the one who kept finding reasons Grace shouldn't come see me. Told myself it would hurt her more to watch me like this." Amelia didn't offer easy comfort or a quick solution. "What do you think it did instead?" she asked gently. Jonah didn't answer that. He didn't need to. The answer was sitting in his own silence. Amelia didn't promise to fix what had broken between Jonah and his daughter. She offered something smaller, more immediate, a few hours of paid maintenance work around the church, once she learned about his years of construction experience. Jonah started the following morning, repairing a broken shelf in the community kitchen, with hands that clearly remembered the work even after months of not using them. Within weeks, he'd fixed cabinets, tables, storage shelving throughout the building, becoming slowly someone the community actually depended on again. For the first time in longer than he wanted to admit, he had somewhere to be every single morning. Amelia's 16-year-old daughter, Lily, watched him work with quiet curiosity, gradually growing comfortable enough to sit nearby while he repaired things. One afternoon, she found him fixing a broken wooden toy for the younger children who used the kitchen, his hands moving with careful, practiced precision. "Why don't you make something for your own daughter?" Lily asked, more curious than accusing. Jonah went still. Then, without a word, he opened his old leather briefcase and showed her what he'd been carrying this entire time. Grace's childhood drawings, old school papers, photographs worn soft from handling. Not the belongings of a man who'd forgotten his daughter. The belongings of a man too afraid to face her. Lily understood immediately and told her mother. Amelia asked Jonah's permission before contacting Claire, and made one thing clear from the start. Whatever happened next would center Grace's feelings first, not Jonah's guilt. Claire was cautious, protective in the particular way of someone who'd spent years quietly absorbing another parent's absence. "She's already been disappointed enough," Claire told Amelia. "I won't set her up for another broken promise." Amelia didn't push. She simply explained, patiently, that Jonah wasn't asking to take Grace back. He only wanted the chance to start showing up again, however small that chance might be. Weeks later, Claire brought Grace to the church community kitchen on an ordinary Saturday, without fully explaining why. Grace saw her father across the room and stopped walking entirely. Jonah didn't rush toward her. He didn't reach for a hug he hadn't earned yet. He simply stood where he was and said quietly, "I don't expect you to forgive me today." Grace studied him a long moment, 14 years old and carrying more caution than a child should have to carry. "I didn't come to forgive you," she said finally. "I came to see if you were really here." It wasn't an ending. It was, quietly, a beginning. Amelia created small, unforced opportunities for father and daughter to simply exist near each other. Lunches in the kitchen, quiet afternoons in the church garden, moments where Grace could watch Jonah work without either of them needing to explain anything out loud. Jonah learned slowly to listen more than he explained, to let his showing up speak louder than any apology could. Meanwhile, Grace and Lily discovered they shared a love of drawing and photography, their personalities entirely different. Lily easy and spontaneous, Grace guarded and dryly funny, and somehow that difference became exactly what made their friendship work. Before long, Grace wasn't only coming to the church for her father anymore. She was coming for her best friend. One afternoon, working beside Jonah as he repaired an old wooden table, Grace suddenly recognized the design beneath his hands. "Did you make my table like this?" she asked. Jonah looked up at her. "I made yours before you were born." Grace sat down beside him without being asked, the first time she'd ever approached her father instead of the other way around. Jonah found steady work, rented a small apartment, and began spending regular weekends with Grace, while she continued living with Claire. Nobody pretending that difficult years had never happened. Everybody understanding that rebuilding trust took longer than any single reunion. Grace and Lily launched a small school project, photographing elderly residents around town, recording their favorite memories, and Jonah built the wooden display frames for their exhibition in the church hall. At the opening, Claire stood beside Jonah, watching the girls arrange their work. "You know she doesn't need you to make up for the past anymore," she said quietly. "Then what does she need?" Jonah asked. Claire smiled. "You to keep showing up." Grace crossed the room a moment later, Lily beside her. "Dad, Lily says you're good at building things. Can you help us with the last frame?" Jonah smiled. "Yeah, I can do that." He followed them, and this time, he wasn't the man sleeping outside a church entrance with nothing but a briefcase and a sleeping bag. He was a father who'd finally learned that rebuilding a life wasn't about one grand apology. It was about showing up, quietly, day after day, until the people he'd hurt could finally believe he was staying. The warm meal Amelia gave him that first cold morning hadn't magically changed his life. It had simply given him one safe place to begin changing it himself. If this story reminded you that healing rarely happens all at once, share it with someone who needs that reminder today. Leave it a like, and stay a little longer. There's always another story worth telling.